You know that hollow ache just beneath your breastbone, the one that wakes you before dawn and lingers long after you force yourself upright? You felt it, an endless void that whispers you're never enough, never whole. You've scoured every self-help book, every pep talk, only to find that the echo of your own pain grows louder, more insistent. There's no quick fix here, no pat answer to stitch this wound closed. And that's okay, because this truth you've carried in silence is valid. Your exhaustion, your doubt, your midnight tears, they matter. By the end of this journey, you will understand why your pain is not a curse, but a gift, a door swinging open to the deepest power you've been too afraid to claim. If I'm honest, positive thinking has become a velvet bandage over a festering wound. We're told to repeat affirmations at dawn, to choose gratitude, to paint over our pain with bright slogans on pastel backgrounds. But when night falls and the world turns silent, those slogans fall away like brittle leaves and the void returns with a roar. Optimism didn't heal you, it trained you to ignore the ache. Every forced smile, every "I'm fine" only deepened your sense of emptiness, because you knew, deep down, that no amount of pep could touch the raw nerve of your unspoken despair. Most psychologists won't tell you that this isn't your failure, it's the system's. You've sat on crisp couches, nodded along to soothing voices, and dutifully completed worksheets designed to reframe your thoughts. You journaled until your pen ran dry. You meditated until your mind raced with anxiety, and you left each session feeling both lighter and somehow heavier, as if you'd carried an invisible load only to exchange it for something equally opaque. Those practices promised clarity, but more often they delivered confusion, templates and labels in place of real insight. This sounds harsh, but therapy as we know it is an industry built on hope and perpetuated by our collective desperation. It sells you the belief that the next exercise, the next book, the next specialist will unlock your cage. And for a moment, you believe it. You feel the sweet rush of possibility that maybe, just maybe, the answer lies around the corner. Yet time and again, that corner turns out to be another corridor lined with motivational posters, a hall of mirrors where you catch fleeting glimpses of yourself but never find an exit. Beneath these false comforts, a hidden architecture of self-sabotage grows. It is a network woven from your earliest disappointments, the careless words of a parent, the betrayals of a friend, the shame you swallowed when vulnerability betrayed you. Every time you try to climb out, that network tightens, whispering that you're unworthy of relief. It crafts elaborate illusions. You're healed now, you deserve happiness, only to collapse them at the first sign of progress, ensuring you remain trapped in a cycle of hope and despair. There's a cynical genius in this system. It teaches you to treat symptoms, never causes. You learn to calm your breath, to adjust your posture, to reframe your thoughts, while the deeper contagion, your unintegrated wounds, remains festering in the shadows. You might call it avoidance, but avoidance is too conscious. This is unconscious self-preservation, protecting you from the terror of facing what lies beneath by keeping you busy with surface-level fixes. And so, you become an unwilling co-conspirator in your own confinement. Imagine standing in front of a grand theater, dazzled by the lights and the music, convinced that the performance is real. But behind the velvet curtain, machinery clanks and reels spin, creating an illusion more elaborate than anything you could have imagined. That machinery is your unprocessed pain, set into motion by every well-meaning but misguided tactic you've employed. The applause you crave is directed at the spectacle, not at the soul that trembles behind it. Here's the brutal truth. You did everything you were told to do. You mastered breathing exercises, practiced positive self-talk, dissected your trauma with clinical precision. You showed up You invested time and money, and you believed in the promise of transformation. Yet here you are, still hollowed out, still searching for something that feels permanent. It's not your fault. You were navigating a labyrinth designed to keep you on the same path over and over without ever touching the center. What if the very methods you trusted were the ones that kept you at arm's length from yourself? What if every affirmation, every step-by-step program, every comforting statistic was a barrier, not a bridge? Your pain was not meant to be erased. It was meant to be met. You were led to believe that healing is linear. A straight climb toward a peak that once reached guarantees serenity. But real healing is more like rock climbing without a rope. Dangerous, unpredictable, and utterly non-linear. There are moments when you plummet deeper than ever, moments when you cling to tiny ledges of insight so fragile they might crumble beneath your touch. And yet, in that free fall, there is possibility. In the absence of easy answers, you confront your raw self, not the edited version you project in motivational memes, but the unvarnished you, trembling with fear and longing. You discover that beneath the panic and the shame is a reservoir of strength forged in the crucible of your suffering. That strength does not come from positive thinking. It comes from looking into the abyss and choosing to stay present. You've done everything right, but you've been deceived. The road you've traveled was paved with good intentions and empty promises. Now it's time to dismantle the illusions, to tear down the theater, and expose the machinery behind the curtain. Only then can you step into the arena of true transformation, where your pain is not a problem to be solved, but a teacher to be honored. But there is something even more terrifying, and we'll get to that next. If these words resonate with the ache you carry, subscribe now, because what you're about to uncover isn't for everyone. Most psychologists won't tell you the truth about why your shadow self holds the key to your power. They'll hand you another worksheet or a new mantra, but I'm inviting you behind the curtain into the raw, unfiltered work that truly transforms. Hit subscribe so that more seekers like you can join this journey of radical honesty. Together, we'll dismantle the illusions that have kept us small and shine a light on the strength hidden within our darkest wounds. In the dark theater of your inner life, two figures loom larger than any others: the unseen realm of the unconscious and the shadow that lurks at its edges. Carl Jung called the unconscious the great reservoir of everything you have experienced, thought, or felt, especially what you have repressed or denied. It is not a sinister place in itself, but rather a storehouse of all those impulses, memories, and talents you have cast aside because they felt too dangerous, too shameful, or simply too inconvenient. Imagine a vast attic in your mind, piled high with old trunks of forgotten desires, half-remembered dreams, and the echoes of childhood wounds. That attic is always there, humming with energy, whether you know it or not. Your shadow is the part of that unconscious you most refuse to see, the traits, urges, and fears you reject in yourself. Perhaps it is the anger you judge as unworthy, the envy you fear will shame you, or the vulnerability you hide behind a mask of competence. The shadow is not evil, it is merely disowned. When you deny these aspects, they do not vanish. They grow stronger in secret, tugging at your thoughts, steering your choices, and coloring your relationships with a quiet malice. It's like trying to ignore a wound that pulses with pain. The more you pretend it's healed, the more it festers beneath the surface. Freud gave us another lens, the idea of complexes, knots of emotion and memory woven around themes like power, intimacy, or rejection. A complex forms when an experience charges you so deeply that normal thought cannot process it. Instead, your psyche builds a defensive fortress, burying the complex in the subconscious and naming it only in dreams or Freudian slips. You might call it the mother complex if your relationship with your mother left an indelible mark of need or guilt, or the inferiority complex if repeated failures convinced you were unworthy. These complexes act like magnets, drawing you toward situations that echo their central drama, even when you consciously try to avoid them. Put together, Jung's unconscious and shadow, and Freud's complexes reveal a terrifying paradox. The parts of you you least want to meet have the greatest power over you. They orchestrate your fears, sabotage your successes, and whisper that your efforts to change are futile. And here's the catch. Mainstream psychology, with its emphasis on positive thinking and symptom management, often teaches you techniques to breathe, meditate, or reframe your thoughts, none of which touch the foundation of these structures. You learn to calm the storm on the surface, but the undercurrents remain unseen and unaddressed. So what is the path forward? It is counterintuitive and, frankly, terrifying. You must turn toward what frightens you most. You must invite your shadow into the light of your own awareness. You must reach into the dusty corners of that attic and open those trunks of memory, even if they smell of rot. This is the paradoxical work of integration, not to vanquish your darkness, but to embrace it, to hold it in your arms like a wounded child, to listen to its story without judgment. In practical terms, this can begin with a simple yet radical act, noticing. Whenever you feel an intense emotion, a flash of anger, a surge of shame, a pang of envy, pause. Ask yourself, where is that feeling coming from? What part of me remembers a similar moment of hurt? This is not an exercise in self-criticism. It is an investigation. You become a detective in your own psyche, tracking down the fugitive complexes that roam your inner landscape. Over time, these investigations reveal patterns, how a remark from a partner resurrects the voice of a critical parent, or how a lost opportunity dredges up the shame of past failures. Once you've mapped these patterns, you can begin a second, deeper move: dialogue. In a journal or aloud in a quiet room, speak to those parts of you that feel hidden. If your shadow whispers that you are unworthy, you might say, "I hear you. Tell me more about where you learned that. When did you first feel this way?" By offering compassion rather than denial, you weaken the defensive walls of the complex. You transform it from an unseen saboteur into a wounded fragment seeking recognition. And then comes the hardest step: integration. This is not achieved by erasing the shadow, but by weaving it into the tapestry of your conscious life. Acknowledge that your anger can be a source of boundary-setting strength. Admit that your envy can highlight what you truly value. Accept that your vulnerabilities teach you humility and empathy. In doing so, you reclaim energy that was once tied up in suppression, and you expand your capacity for authenticity. Consider the archetype of the warrior in Jungian psychology, a figure who embodies courage, discipline, and the will to confront internal and external threats. Many of us wage an unconscious war against our own shadows, deploying weapons of distraction, workaholism, perfectionism, relentless positivity. But what if you could redirect that warrior energy inward toward your own suffering? What if your anger became the blade that severs old patterns of self-sabotage rather than the shield you hide behind? What if your shame became the lantern that illuminates the path to self-acceptance? This is no small task. It requires the kind of fierce honesty that most therapists will avoid because it threatens to dissolve their comfortable frameworks. It demands that you accept disorientation, moments when you wonder who you are without the stories you've lived by. You will feel unanchored, and you may even fear that integration means losing yourself rather than finding yourself. But here's the truth: the self you lose was only a partial self, constructed to defend against pain. The self you gain is whole because it includes every fragment, even the dark ones. Let's bring this to life with an example. Imagine someone who, as a child, was scolded for expressing sadness. She learned that tears were dangerous, that vulnerability invited punishment. As a result, she developed a shame complex around her own emotions, and her shadow swallowed her tears, turning them into silent floods of anxiety. In adulthood, she may appear calm and collected, but inside her chest, a river roars. Every time she nears tears, she clamps her mouth shut, tightens her shoulders, and tells herself, "Get it together." In therapy, she learns to name her feelings and breathe into them. But the anxiety returns unless she addresses the root, the shame of vulnerability. So she sits with the shame. She writes to it, "I understand you thought that tears meant danger, but you were only a child." She draws a dialogue. The part of her that feels shame responds with images of that scolding voice, the trembling in her chest, the sting of tears rolling down her cheeks. She allows the memories to surface, not to wallow in them, but to honor them. Over months, her tears return, first in private moments, then in gentle releases in conversation with a trusted friend. The shame does not vanish, but it softens. It becomes a companion rather than a tyrant. And with that softening, the anxiety diminishes too, because the original wound has been met, not just its symptoms. As you confront your own shadow archetypes, be they the orphan who fears abandonment, the rebel who battles authority, the saboteur who undercuts success, you engage in what Jung called the process of individuation. It is the journey toward wholeness, not by piling on virtues, but by integrating the parts you have cast aside. This is the heart of deep psychological work, recognizing that light and shadow are two sides of the same coin, and that true power arises when both are united in conscious awareness. There is a further paradox. The more you accept your darkness, the more you will illuminate your light. When your anger is no longer buried, it can fuel your commitment to justice. When your envy is no longer denied, it can guide you toward your deepest aspirations. When your fear is no longer shunned, it can sharpen your instincts for survival and growth. You transform what was once a source of suffering into a source of vitality. This path is neither linear nor predictable. You will circle back to old wounds, discovering new facets of your shadow even as you thought you had mastered them. You will feel moments of triumph when a long-forgotten talent resurfaces, a buried love of music, a suppressed gift for empathy, only to stumble again into familiar patterns of avoidance. Each stumble is not a failure, but an invitation, another chance to meet yourself where you are, with compassion. Remember, you did not learn these patterns in a day, and you will not dissolve them overnight. The unconscious operates on its own timeline. What matters is your commitment to showing up again and again to the work of integration. Even small acts of noticing, of compassionate dialogue, of embracing discomfort accumulate over time. They signal to your deep self that you are willing to be whole, that you will no longer uphold the split between light and shadow. As you build this practice into your life, you may find that your relationships shift. You may feel less reactive, more grounded. You may discover an authenticity that attracts others who are also tired of the masks. And you will learn that power is not measured by control or perfection, but by the courage to face your own darkness and bring it into the fold of your conscious being. Now, you have seen how the unconscious and shadow, the complexes and defenses, form a hidden matrix that shapes your life without your awareness. You have glimpsed the paradoxical path of integration, not eradication, but embrace. You know that your pain is not a burden to be cast off, but a doorway to untapped strength. And you have the first tools, notice, dialogue, compassionate presence, to begin dismantling the illusions that have held you hostage. But the journey does not end here. There is more to uncover, more archetypes to meet, more wounds to honor, and beyond them, a power more profound than you have ever known. And that is where we turn next. Begin by finding a quiet moment. No phone, no distractions, just you and a notebook. Close your eyes and let an image rise. Maybe it's the face of someone who shamed you for your tears, or the gaze of that inner voice that says you're not enough. Write down every detail, the texture of their clothes, the weight of their words, the ache in your chest as you relive that moment. This is your invitation into shadow work, using vivid imagery to unearth the parts of you you've long denied. Next, address that inner critic directly. On the page, start a dialogue. You say, "I'm weak when I'm sad." Show me where you learned that. Then let your shadow answer. Perhaps it speaks in fragments. "I was punished for crying. I had to be perfect to be loved." Don't judge the words, simply record them. Over time, these exchanges will reveal the patterns that hijack your self-worth, and by witnessing them, you dissolve their secret authority. Now shift your attention to your body. Trauma lives in tissue, in shallow breaths, and clenched jaws. Place a hand on your solar plexus, that hollow just below your breastbone, and breathe into it. Feel the rise and fall, the subtle tremor of stored emotion. If you sense tightness, stay with it. Name it silently. This is fear, or this is shame. Breathe beneath it, like a river flowing under ice. This is trauma plastica, using gentle awareness to soften the hard places and let locked-in energy begin to move. Combine these practices into a simple daily ritual. Spend 5 minutes each morning on image journaling, 5 minutes on dialogue with your critic, and 5 minutes on body-centered breathing. Consistency matters more than duration. Each time you show up, you send a message to your unconscious. I am ready to know you. As your private work deepens, remember you're not alone. This channel is a gathering of seekers who refuse to settle for surface-level fixes. If you're ready to stop playing roles, type "I'm shedding masks" in the comments. When you share those words, you join a community committed to honesty over comfort, depth over distraction. You signal to yourself and others, I choose truth, even when it hurts. Feel the power in that simple act of typing. It isn't just a comment, it's a declaration of presence, a bond with those who have felt this same void, this same hunger for something real. Read the other messages, offer a nod of solidarity, and know that every time you witness another's courage, you strengthen your own. These tools are not quick fixes. Shadow work and trauma plastica demand patience and courage. You will encounter resistance, nights when the page stays blank, or mornings when your chest feels too tight to breathe. When that happens, remember that resistance is its own message. Ask, what am I afraid to see? Which part of me clings to the illusion that pain can be banished? This curiosity itself is a tool, an open door to the next level of your journey. And here is the most painful truth. Your pain has taught you what no victory lap ever could, that beneath every scar lies a wisdom carved in fire. When you stop fighting the ache, it reveals its true face, a guide pointing you toward the parts of yourself you've long neglected. Embrace it as teacher, not tormentor. Lean into its lessons, and you'll find that every tremor of fear, every echo of shame, is an invitation to greater wholeness. If these words struck a chord deep within, type, I no longer run from pain, in the comments. Let's witness together how many of us choose presence over escape. This is only the beginning.